Okay, I just want to make this perfectly clear. No, I am not a brony. Just because I watched and liked this show doesn't automatically make me one. In fact, this is a show I never actually bothered to check out until the last few years of its lifespan. Probably when, say, around the time of the theatrical movie in 2017. Since I was still under the impression that princesses and ponies were, you know. Though I wonder if having a little sister has helped to break that stigma of mine. Because I did start to watch a couple of episodes from the show and even marathon the entirety of it after it ended. And after doing so, I'm glad I did because I ended up really liking this show. And then I ended up shelving the series around the start of Gen 5 and never really bothered to rewatch any of the episodes since then. But just like with The Loud House and The Fairly Odd Parents, I recently got back to rewatching a couple of the episodes from the show and reacquainting myself with Generation 4 of this franchise. And no, I haven't seen, nor will I bother to check out Generation 5. Okay, I watched a new generation, that's more than enough. But back to Gen 4. My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. Subtle. So what are my thoughts on the show now? Well, let's start by taking a look at the first season. Despite not having seen the first season during its heyday, it actually feels kind of novel seeing where the show started all those years ago. The world building and lore established during the first season was simple. We got to know some of these charming and likable characters during their level 1, and the series was still trying to find a bit of its own identity. That last part is especially noticeable, as it can be very clear when an episode is trying to appeal to its younger demographic. Not to a point where it feels patronizing like, say, Generation 3, but you can definitely tell some of the later seasons have been trying to improve moving forward. Overall, I think the first season is good and nothing more. There are some episodes that range from decent to excellent, but then there are the middle-of-the-road episodes and especially the bad ones. But which episodes are the best and worst? Well, that's what we're here to find out, with the top 5 best and worst episodes of Friendship is Magic Season 1. Just like with all my previous countdowns, these are all my subjective opinions, and if you disagree with me on some of them, then that's perfectly fine. And I wouldn't mind hearing your favorites and least favorites down in the comments below. But with all that said, let's get started with this countdown. Owl's Well That Ends Well. In this episode, Twilight comes across an owl that flies into her library, so she takes him in and raises it as her second assistant behind Spike. However, Spike grows a bit jealous of him, thinking he'll take over as Twilight's personal favorite, resulting in him wanting to make the owl look worse. However, when caught, Twilight is disappointed of Spike and he feels hurt by her words, leading to him throwing in the towel and running away in shame. Jealousy plotlines are almost never good. I'm sure it's possible to make this trope work, but most of the time it just makes the jealous character in the storyline really unlikable, and this episode is really no exception. All this is Spike acting all petty and hostile towards this owl that just came in. Sure, there is the exchange between him and Owlicious, but the way it's framed makes Spike look like a jerk because he can't speak owl. And sure, there are moments where Owlicious one-ups Spike, as well as catch him lying to Twilight, but I still fail to sympathize with Spike because his actions presented are awful. I understand he's just a kid, but that shouldn't be an excuse for stuff like framing Owlicious for murder. And the humor can't save this episode either because most of the jokes in this episode fizzled out. I mean, Spike turning into this mustache-twirling stereotypical villain was mildly amusing. Yeah, I may be biased towards those, but even then it still ties into Spike being an unlikable character. The ending is cute, I guess, but then it lost me when they played the same joke about Spike not understanding Owlicious. This episode is just really bothersome and tropey. The story is repetitive, it isn't funny, the characters can be pretty unlikable. It's just overall a typical bad episode.
Look, all you need to know is that I'm number 1 and you're number 2. Got it?
Cutie Mark Chronicles. This episode follows the Cutie Mark Crusaders trying to discover their talent. In doing so, they decide to seek inspiration from Rainbow Dash and how she earned her Cutie Mark. But on the way, the rest of the main six give them their story behind their cutie marks, revealing something interesting within each of their stories. I really like the framing device of this episode. It's essentially each of the main six's backstories and how they got their cutie marks. And it's novel to see everything that made them who they are today. Sure, the fact that it was all connected to this one thing that one character did is a bit convenient, but I don't mind it in this case. I mean, with a show called Friendship is Magic, it wouldn't be surprising for them to connect the main six before they even met. And at the very least, the rain boom was foreshadowed in each of the backstories. So there is a bit of natural build-up into the reveal. Speaking of whom, I think this episode is really well paced. It doesn't feel like any of the backstories go on for too long or too quick. And they don't drag on for too long with any of the intermissions between these stories. I mean, in the case of Twilight, they immediately cut to the CMC listening to her backstory for a joke. But at the very least, we should already know a lot about Twilight considering she's the main protagonist. So it makes sense to jump into her backstory when it was her turn. And while on the topic of humor, it's probably my one gripe with this episode. I think this episode is a bit lighter on jokes, putting more focus on the story. And when it does try to throw some, aside from that and maybe a couple, it's not all that good. I'm also not a fan of Fluttershy's song So Many Wonders. It sounds so generic and unnecessary. I get it, the woods are full of woodland creatures, you don't have to burst into song about it. But the story definitely makes up for both of my problems. It's overall a good and novel episode.
We all owe our cutie marks to you! Do you realize what this means? All of us had a special connection before we even met.
We've been BFFs forever, and we didn't even know it.
Come here, y'all.
Oh, I love you guys!
Over a barrel. Applejack and her friends are heading to Appaloosa when they're caught in a fight between the settler ponies and the buffaloes. Spike ends up captured by the buffaloes, so the main six split up to retrieve him while also preparing Appaloosa for the war. This episode couldn't be any more blatant or in your face if it tried. And yes, I am aware that this is a show aimed towards a much younger demographic. I shouldn't really be annoyed with the writing of some of these episodes, especially given it's the first season of the show. But they've shown us that they don't always have to talk down to its audience to make good episodes if these are any indication. So it makes episodes like this stick out a lot more. But even then, there are still things about this episode that really rub me the wrong way. The story, repetitive. You can predict the stuff that's happening in this episode within a mile away. There's an ongoing battle between two different factions. The main six try to find a way to stop it, only for it to escalate even further. And after all that battling, they eventually decide to get along. There's nothing new added into this episode, and it's just boring. The humor of the episode is no better. With these jokes that did get a mild laugh or chuckle out of me, there were like 5 or 10 jokes that fell flat for me.
Like horse-drawn carriages.
Okay, you pull now.
We just switched.
This episode's also home to what is probably my least favorite song in the season, You Gotta Share, You Gotta Care. Putting aside the fact that the lyrics just try so hard to hammer in its message, it isn't even all that fun to listen to.
You gotta share, you gotta care. It's the right thing to do. You gotta share, you gotta care.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
But in the context of the episode, it's somehow even worse. When Pinky sings this song the first time, none of the tribes come to peace. Yeah, I know it's supposed to be for a joke, but it's not really all that funny. And you heard me, I said first time. Because Pinky decides to sing that song again in a much worse scenario. After the Chief Buffalo decides not to go in for attack, only for him to charge right into battle after she starts singing it again. Pinky, I like you, but damn, this was not one of your best appearances. All in all, this episode manages to be both boring and annoying. The story is formulaic, none of the characters are enjoyable. It's just a mess all throughout.
Rayburn, listen, something terrible's happened.
Terrible is right. Your train is a full 7 minutes late. That's 7 minutes less for you to delight in the pleasures and wonders of Appaloosa.
Dragon Shy. A dragon is sleeping high in the mountains by Ponyville, causing it to become engulfed in a smog of its breath. So the main six now have to trek up to the mountains and find a way to get the dragon to leave and save Ponyville. Their plan is to have Fluttershy use her animal communication skills to convince the dragon to find a new place to slumber, but she's very afraid of big dragons. I often hear this episode coined as one of the many examples of the show appealing far beyond its target demographic. And yeah, there are a lot of elements that makes this episode feel special. It's a simple adventure story, but it doesn't at any point feel like it's trying to hold the viewer's hands. And there is still some actual stakes that amps up the tension. They have to stop a dragon from engulfing Ponyville in a cloud of smoke. And the episode doesn't shy away from character development with Fluttershy. No pun intended. It's interesting watching her go from the rusty anchor holding back the main six to actually facing fear right in the face in the defense of her friends. And they don't spare us the jokes either. The different ways the main six try to escort the dragon out of the mountains is really funny. Yeah, there can be some jokes where the punchline feels obvious, but they are still mildly amusing.
Obviously, I would be more than happy to keep an eye on your jewels while you're gone.
I was this close to getting that diamond.
You mean getting rid of that dragon?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So yeah, I can really see the appeal of this episode. It's well written, adventurous, funny. Definitely a good place to start off if you're first watching the show.
Don't you, but I mean, mister. Now, what do you have to say for yourself? I said, what do you have to say for yourself?
Ghostbusters. In this episode, a wandering magician named Trixie rolls into Ponyville and shows off her magic tricks. But with her ego over her simple tricks and her story behind taking on an Ursa Major, everyone just mocks her and sees her as a show-off. The main six even convince Trixie that Twilight is better than she'll ever be, prompting Trixie to have Twilight present her magic skills, to which she declines, fearing she'll be showing off. This episode is annoying, plain and simple. First and foremost, aside from maybe Twilight and Spike, none of the characters are likable. The whole driving factor is that everyone is heckling Trixie for being a show-off, with the rest of the main six being a part of this group. Yet in literally the following scenes, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity try to best Trixie, essentially making themselves look like giant hypocrites. And no, them praising Twilight for her magic skills at the end of the episode doesn't help matters. And then there are the newcomers in this episode. The first of these are Snips and Snails, and my god, they're more plot devices than they are characters. All they do in this episode is blindly praise the great and powerful Trixie for her simple magic tricks, and her story about her taking on an Ursa Major. And when someone questioned her story, they actually went out and searched for it and let it wreak havoc in Ponyville. And they essentially get no punishment for it whatsoever. It doesn't help either that their voices are obnoxious.
Oh, sweet! That settles it. Trixie truly is the most talented, most magical, most awesome unicorn in Ponyville. No, in all of Equestria.
It's characters like these that make me question why bronies were even formed in the first place. And yet those two aren't even the worst characters in this episode. No, that title goes to the great and powerful Trixie. Holy shit, she is so insufferable. While it might not be her worst appearance in this show, it's nonetheless a terrible first impression for the character. She has a massive ego, she never knows when to shut the hell up, she has no interesting skills yet has the audacity to downplay others, and plays the whole Liar's Act story and learns absolutely nothing by the end of it. There isn't anything redeemable about her in this episode. Well, isn't that the point of the character? You're supposed to dislike her. Well, yeah, you'd be right about that, but it's not fun to hate her. I mean, compare her to Discord in the following season. In-universe, he's meant to be such a reviled character, but we as the audience find enjoyment out of him because he's so charismatic. And that's just from his debut appearance where he started off as an evil villain. but I find nothing funny or enjoyable out of Trixie. The biggest sin with her and the rest of the characters, however, is that they fail to get me to root for either side. The episode wants us to side with the main six, but I can't because they're massive hypocrites. But you're not rooting for Trixie either because she's an egotistical Do you see what I'm getting at here? Everything about this episode is aggravating. Is there anything in this episode that I liked? Well, I guess there's a couple things. Like, the climax of the episode was mildly interesting when Twilight stepped in. The visuals presented in this episode is pretty good, particularly the scenes with the Ursa Major. Also, the twist behind it at the end was a chuckle-worthy moment, mainly because it was at the expense of Trixie. Also, the scene where Rarity's hair turned green had me laughing thanks to the added punchline at the end.
Such an awful, awful color. Well, I never.
But take all that away, what exactly are you left with? A really annoying episode with unlikable characters that pretty much nullifies any sort of positives I would have with this episode. This could have been number 1, but I think the following episodes just bothered me a hair bit more.
Well, well, well. It seems we have some naysayers in the audience. Who is so ignorant as to challenge the magical ability of the great and powerful Trixie?
Griffin the Brush Off. Pinkie Pie hits it off well with Rainbow Dash with their shared interest in pranking. However, Rainbow's old friend, Gilda the Griffin, comes over and hangs out, and she doesn't take much of a liking to Pinkie, telling her to buzz off, making her feel left out. Pinkie then notices more of Gilda's aggressive side and tries to find a way to fix the situation. Here's an episode that surprised me with how much I liked it. I was worried this episode would fall into the jealousy plotline, something they did later on with Owl's Well that ends well, and you saw how that turned out. But miraculously, this episode managed to avoid every pitfall of this trope. For the most part. There's a scene where Twilight accuses Pinkie of being jealous, and I'll admit that's where my worries started to kick in. But thankfully, that's the only point in the episode where it's brought up. In fact, there's never any other point where Pinkie Pie comes across as unlikable. And she's pretty much this episode's strong suit. I love the bits in the beginning where she forms a friendship with Rainbow Dash, with them pulling off pranks on all their friends, and Pinkie knowing when she thinks they've gone too far. And then you add Gilda into the mix, and the banter between her, Rainbow, and Pinkie can be pretty entertaining.
I win! As if I won, dude! No way! Yes way! Oh, come on! I was way ahead of you! I don't think so. Oh, remember back in camp? There is no way you beat me. Whatever. Wow, guys! That was really close! But I think Rainbow Dash beat you by a teeny weeny bitty hair. Ha! See? Good thing Pinkie Pie's here to keep you honest, G.
Initially, I had some concerns about Gilda being an annoying bully who's very clingy about who Rainbow Dash hangs out with. But honestly, she's pretty much what Trixie should have been. Like I said, the banter between her and our two main characters are pretty entertaining. And yeah, there still are some moments where we're supposed to hate Gilda. But what makes her more tolerable than Trixie is catharsis. Trixie pretty much got zero repercussion back in Ghostbusters outside of maybe that one bit of humiliation, which makes her conclusion in that episode feel very unsatisfying. Whereas here, during the third act, we see her constantly getting humiliated both physically and mentally. And with her actions presented beforehand, it makes it all the more satisfying.
Hi! Gee, the punch! Huh? Well, what do you know? Pepper in the vanilla lemon drops and the punch served in a dribble glass.
And by the end of the episode, when she finally explodes at everybody, Rainbow Dash finally puts her foot down and cuts off her friendship with Gilda. And he gets bonus points for being a precautionary tale to children about toxic friendships. Overall, this episode pretty much shattered all my expectations. The story is well written, the characters are entertaining and likable, the message is well executed. It's an all-around fun time and a good example of how to execute this kind of trope.
Last one to that cloud up there is a gnarly dragon egg. Go! I think the high altitude is making you dizzy.
The Showstoppers. This episode centers around the Cutie Mark Crusaders trying to find their special talent and earn their cutie marks. So when the Ponyville talent show rolls around, they decide to work together and put on a big performance in the hopes they'll finally get their marks. This was just a sad display. For being one of the first episodes to center around the CMC getting their cutie marks, it left a pretty sour first impression. First off, it's boring. The first act of the episode keeps giving us the same old joke. They try to do a tough activity to get their cutie marks, they fail at it, and they're bummed to see they didn't get a cutie mark for effort. Rinse and repeat. Also, if we're to believe that cutie marks are meant to symbolize someone's personality or unique talent, then they kinda shot themselves in the foot. As we see, each of the CMC have some sort of unique talent of their own.
There you are, Sweetie Belle. See? I told you we could find her by following your totally awesome voice. What's that sweet tune you're singing?
Oh, I was just working on our new Cutie Mark Crusaders theme song.
Now yes, I am aware of what happens later on in the show, but in the context of this episode, it's a glaring omission. Then the second act of the episode is pretty much no better. Once again, we see them play the joke of them failing at preparation for this big talent show, and it's just so repetitive. It's basically a filler episode, plain and simple. All of this I'd be forgiving of if the comedy was at least clever or witty, but it really isn't. By the time we got to the third act, I just wanted it to be over and done with. But we do eventually get to the CMC performing at the big talent show, and yes, I'd argue that it's the best part of the episode. At least in an ironic sense. I was expecting to dread it, but I won't lie, I was a little charmed by it. Yeah, it does still play the same style of humor of this episode, and the singing, well, just listen.
We are the Cutie Mark Crusaders on a quest to find out who we are, and we will never stop the journey, not until we have our cutie marks.
Awkward. Look, I can understand if some people would find this pretty cringy, but I can't help it. Sometimes I can get a bit of enjoyment out of things that are so bad that it's good. But putting that aside, everything else I would have to sit through in order to get to that point is painfully dull. It just doesn't make watching this episode all that worth it. All you need to do is just watch the scene on YouTube and that's it. That is just how bad the Showstoppers is.
And we will never stop the journey, not until we have our cutie marks.
Party of One. After hosting a birthday party for her pet, Pinky decides to host another party the next day. Her friends claim to be too busy to come, however she notices some suspicious activity they've been doing, leading to her believing something was fishy. When she investigates, she comes to the conclusion that they're ditching her parties because they don't like them, or even her for that matter, which really hurts her feelings as she slips into isolated insanity. This is another example of an episode that shows the strengths of Pinkie Pie as a character. While she's probably the member of the main six I relate to the least, I nonetheless consider her my favorite because of how likable and entertaining she can be. And in the case of this episode, we see the side of her personality get challenged, as her friends decline on the invitation to another party she's hosting. This episode could have easily slipped on itself and made one side look bad. Whether the main six was declining Pinkie Pie's invitation, or how Pinkie Pie feels mad at her friends for not coming to her party. But thankfully the episode manages to avoid doing that. Yes, Pinkie Pie does feel offended that her friends declined, but from her perspective she thinks they're hiding something from her. But she doesn't do anything to make her unlikable like guilt tripping. Instead we see her trying so desperately to make herself happy, to a point she ends up having a psychotic mental breakdown. In a way, she's depressed. And this entire scene is incredibly unsettling, but I don't mean that in a bad way.
Not so bad. Police! They're a bunch of losers.
Oh, come on now. Losers might be a little strong, don't you think?
After the way they treated you, I say losers isn't strong enough.
Well, it was pretty rude.
Meanwhile, the rest of the main six are trying to hide something from Pinkie Pie, but it's subtle enough for viewers to understand that it's not out of malice. And by the episode, when the big twist is revealed, it doesn't feel out of nowhere. They aren't just trying to make Pinkie Pie happy out of obligation. They're genuinely doing something nice for Pinkie Pie. I love how the episode finds the perfect balance to avoid making the characters unlikable. And this episode's also funny. I will admit some bits of the episode did drag on for a bit, but for the most part, it did consistently make me chuckle or even laugh.
I can't tell you that, silly. Then it wouldn't be a surprise.
Overall, I have very little to complain about this episode. It had a good shot at being my favorite of the season, but there's still one episode I thought was a bit better. But regardless, it's a great episode and a good example of what makes Pinkie my favorite main six.
I'm having a wonderful time right here.
You should really just come with me.
You heard the lady. She ain't going nowhere, chump.
Who you calling a chump, chump?
Swarm of the Century. In this episode, Fluttershy comes across a species known as the parasprites. Little flies that love to eat and multiply. However, it soon leads to an outbreak of them as they've been multiplying like mad. So Twilight and the others try to find a way to get rid of them before they ruin the upcoming visit from Celestia. All except Pinkie Pie, who works to gather a bunch of random objects while the others just make the situation worse. To reiterate what I said with Over a Barrel, I am aware of the intended age demographic. But when you're shown to avoid talking down to your audience, it makes episodes like these stick out like a sore thumb. This is by far the worst example of it. At least I can give Over a Barrel the benefit of the doubt. The solution and message of that episode is obvious, so much so that it makes the episode predictable. But for as frustrating as it gotten, there was at least a proper act structure. At least the story progressed in a natural way without feeling like it meandered. Swarm of the Century, however, does exactly that. It's nothing but frustrating filler. Right from the start of the episode, I could figure out every single outcome. Someone spots a parasprite, another person understands the problem, but because of wacky and silly failed communications, it leads to the situation getting even worse over the course of the episode. That is literally all this is. Doesn't help either that almost every single character has to hold the idiot stick. Like, Pinkie Pie had no reason to be so cryptic with what she was doing. All she had to tell them was a simple, "Parasprites dance along when they hear these instruments. I can use it to lead them away from Ponyville." And don't even think about giving me that, well, she could sometimes be a little bit oblivious. But if that's the case, then why is she acting so serious in this episode? At least I can give it she's aware of the situation at hand, but it's just further proof she could have been a bit more clear about her intentions. And the sad reality is that she's not the dumbest character in this episode. I mean, by the halfway mark, it looks like the rest of the main six has taken care of the problem. But then this happens.
Where did they come from?
Well, I may have kept just one.
I couldn't help myself. They're just so cute.
That scene right there completely shatters this entire episode. Because they have a clear solution that was only foiled by this one moment, they could just try that method again and make sure all of them are gone. But no, we can't do that because then Pinkie Pie won't be able to save the day at the end. And we wouldn't get the message of how we should listen to what our friends had to say, regardless of how insignificant we think it might be. Okay, putting aside how situational that message might be, I'm not gonna care about what you have to say when I have to sit through all of this. There is nothing redeemable about this episode. It's patronizing, repetitive, annoying, just a mess of an episode. And I have no problems calling it my least favorite episode of season 1. Sonic Rainboom. In this episode, Rainbow Dash is preparing for the Best Young Flyers competition in Cloudsdale, where she'll get to present her skills in front of her idols, the Wonderbolts. However, things take a turn for the worse as, at the same time, Rarity tests out a magic spell that gives her wings. leading to her inadvertently getting put into the competition, which is a serious blow to Rainbow as she fears being outshined. I'm not gonna lie, this episode nailed everything down to a T. Rainbow Dash is a character where I could see both sides of the argument on whether she's the best or worst main 6. But regardless of how I feel about her, I'd say she was at her A game in this episode, showing off her strengths and weaknesses as a character, delving into her childhood backstory and seeing what made her who she is today, and seeing her confident persona get completely shattered when she feels outshined. That last part I can definitely relate with, because I myself do have plenty of confidence issues, mainly because I'm never quite sure how things will go out or how everyone else will react. College has definitely helped into boosting my confidence, but I am still working on that. It also helps that never at any point does it feel like Rainbow Dash is being unlikable. Sure, she does still show a bit of her ego towards the beginning.
Ugh, you're gonna cheer for me like that? Louder.
Yay.
Louder!
Yay.
Louder!
Yay.
But it's not nearly as bad as it could have been. If anything, I see it in two different ways. For one, it could be seen as a bit of catharsis. It tries to find a balance between entertaining and cocky. That way, when we see her ego get shattered, it feels satisfying to a point that we want to see her develop. And it works. And secondly, it could be seen as comedy, which is fitting because this episode can be really funny. In fact, it probably might be the funniest episode this season. Whether it comes from the dialogue or conversations between other characters, or in some gags that tie into the world building of the episode. Which, yeah, this episode also has good world building with the introduction of Cloudsdale. It falls in the category of one of those locations I wish I could live in.
And here's where they make the rainbows. Yeah, rainbows aren't really known for their flavor.
But of course, I can't talk about this episode without mentioning its main attraction, the titular Sonic Rain Boom. And yeah, it is awesome. In fact, it helps into making the climax the highlight of the episode. The name sounds ridiculous, but the way it's animated looks so incredible. And I love how they utilize it as the resolution for the climax. But even without it, this episode would have had a great shot at the top 3. So add this on top of great world building, characters, and comedy. It's no wonder why it remains my favorite episode of season 1. And heck, it has a good shot at being my favorite in the entire show, but we'll just have to wait and see if the later seasons can top it.
I did it! I did it! You sure did. Oh, thank you, Rainbow Dash. You saved my life. Oh yeah, I did that too. Best day ever!
So those are my favorite and least favorite episodes of season 1. Well, that was something. Feels crazy that this show is almost 15 years old, and the first season really hasn't aged all too badly. Sure, it had its bumps in the road, but overall I had a good time with it. But I feel like this show definitely improves more with the later seasons, and I do look forward to talking about those ones. But until then, feel free to tell me your favorites and least favorites in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching, and I am not a brony. Ask me to Brohoof, and I will hurt you!